General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, retired, popularly known as IBB, came to power as a military dictator of Nigeria in 1985 when he orchestrated a palace coup d'etat against his military and political arch-rival, Muhammadu Buhari, and then stepped aside in 1993 following the crisis of Nigeria's Third Republic after his annulment of the elections and the events of June 12 that followed. We will examine some of the events of the IBB era that demonstrates the drama, greed, assassinations, deceits, bribery, looting, and many more that characterize the regime of Nigeria's self-confessed evil genius. Events that form its legacy, and then we ask if it was all really worth it. But before I proceed, if you have not already subscribed to our YouTube channel and followed us on our various social media platforms, and yet to find value in our videos, please do kindly use the handle on the screen and hit the subscribe button. Give this video a thumbs up, share your opinion about this video on the comment section, and please do help us to share our videos with your contacts. The handle that you see on display on the screen is the same for all our social media platforms. Many materials have been surfacing on the internet praising its supposed developmental stride for Nigeria. What the purveyors of such materials, who are obviously trying to rewrite history, are not telling Nigerians is that the country has not recovered from the damage that the IBB era did to Nigeria. And this is the whole point of this video that you are about to watch. We will begin our story with Akilu, a military officer who had just returned from a military training in India at the time, and how IBB recommended him for appointment as the head of the Secret Service. This was in the early 80s, and General Tunde Idiagbon bypassed Akilu, slighted General Babangida by not consulting with him to confirm the new head of the Secret Service from the army. This is the best place to start IBB's story because it signifies the power play or the power tussle between IBB and General Tunde Idiagbon. And this is part of the reason why Babangida and his team decided that the Buhari-Idiagbon regime must be overthrown. Gloria Okon was arrested at the Muritala Mohammed Airport trying to smuggle cocaine out of the country at the time. Gloria claims to be a carrier from the family of one of the two high-ranking military officers deeply involved in the Supreme Military Council's palaver. Gloria was quickly smuggled out of the country, and a carcass burnt beyond recognition of a human body was left in her prison room to deceive the authorities. As Gloria's drama was playing out, Chief MKO Abiola brought a large consignment of banned newsprints into the country, forcing Tunde Idiagbon to insist on the arrest of Chief MKO Abiola. All sorts of calamitous events kept rolling out at the time, including the arrest of one Iku Omola for trying to smuggle a large consignment of cocaine out of the country. He indicted one of the sons of the Dantatas, and they were both tried and sentenced to death. The Dantata family mounted serious pressure on the Supreme Military Council at the time to commute the death sentence to life in prison. That issue heightened the division among the Supreme Military Council members, with the Gloria Okon's high-ranking military benefactor siding with the Dantata family naturally. Tunde Idiagbon insisted that if poor people found guilty or found with cocaine could be punished with death sentence, why should the rich and affluent be spared? Idiagbon also wanted a lawyer representing the accused, a River State chap who had received over 4 million naira at the time as legal fees on the case, to be shot alongside the drug barons for benefiting from evil. The schism between Idiagbon and Babangida totally paralyzed the Supreme Military Council, and the Supreme Military Council could no longer function. Idiagbon thereafter forced a compulsory leave on Babangida under close surveillance with tapped telephone lines and all sorts. Chief MKO Abiola saw the opportunity to save his own neck from the newsprint saga by teaming up with his friend Babangida, and he provided the seed money or the fund for the coup that overthrew Buhari and the Diagbon regime. With the facilitation of Abiola and the Dan Tatars, Shehu Yaradua was brought into the picture to help influence the Saudi Arabian monarch, King Fahd, to extend a special invitation to Diagbon as a guest of the monarch to perform the 1985 Lesser Hajj in Mecca. Diagbon, greatly honored by this invitation, and on that trip to Mecca, he took with him most of his supporters on the already splintered Supreme Military Council, including Maman Vasta. With Diagbon, who was the head of the Buhari regime in every sense of the word, and was very popular because of his transparency, honesty, patriotism, and discipline, out of the way, Buhari, who, according to some sources, was ready to vacate office at any time anyways, was picked up like a helpless chicken at the Dan barracks and dumped in jail. Diagbon, against the coupist's advice, returned home a people's hero, although he too was locked up for several months by Babangida. Somehow, analysts say it did not take too long for Babangida to begin to reveal his secret agenda. They say he had removed the Diagbon and Buhari from power to douse the heated allegation at the time about illegal drug links and to help the IMF and the World Bank to ruin the Naira and open up the Nigerian market as a dumping ground for American and European drugs and decadence. Babangida's first pronouncement in power was to shock the nation by adopting the civilian title of president. They say he did this because of his secret personal ambition to transit into life president in the mold of Presidents Nasser of Egypt and the Yadema of Togo, and also because he wanted to make Chief Abiola his vice president for collaborating with him over their 1985 coup. General Sani Abacha kicked against Chief MKO Abiola becoming the vice president because he too was eyeing Babangida's seat in a possible future coup of his own and wanted to remain the de facto next in command in military terms for eventual easy takeover of power. He would later succeed in this ambition when, upon stepping aside as military dictator, IBB left Abacha, even though he had retired all the other military officers before he left office. They said General Babangida promised Shehu Yaradua a short-lived military transition, after which he would hand over power to him. This was why they said Shehu Yaradua kept boasting at the time during the early stages of Babangida's regime that no force on the earth could stop him from becoming the next president of Nigeria after IBB. Analysts say this was the statement that prompted General Olusegun Obasanjo to state at various fora that he didn't understand what Shehu Yaradua forgot in Aso Rock that he wanted to go back, or forgot in Dodan barracks, sorry. Okay, I think it should be Aso Rock. Forgot in Aso Rock that he needed to go back to pick. Analysts insist that Babangida was so single-minded, self-centered, and power-drunk that he single-handedly forced the OIC membership on Nigeria without respect for our supposed religious secularity. For those who may not know, the IOC is the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. They say he used every means imaginable to assert his power as military head of state at the time. Spiritual, criminal, everything they say was fair to his ruthless power game. The gods of the Marabout also, they say, became privileged guests at Aso Rock, lacing the atmosphere with severe witchcraft, a pattern which was later vigorously sustained by Sani Abacha when he became Nigeria's military dictator. Fear gripped the land. Who was going to be the next victim was the question in the lips of many analysts at the time, because according to them, life was scary and worthless in Nigeria at the time. Assassinations were rampant, sophisticated, and comprehensive, incorporating bombing and daredevil forages. Media houses at the time were burnt down or closed altogether, and critics of government were murdered, incarcerated, or handed into exile. Plane loads of promising young army officers lost their lives in questionable circumstances, Others appeared to have been sacrificed in distant land civil wars when they were sent off to die in most of the operations or missions of Ikomog and so on. The Ejigbo military crash that killed an elite corps of army captains and majors returning to their Jaji training base is a typical example of the terrible human carnage visited upon Nigeria at the time by the desperate tyrants bent on holding on to power indefinitely at all costs. The plane was doctored and it crashed a few seconds after takeoff from the Murtala Mohammed Airport. No rescue attempt was ordered or made until 24 hours after the crash, and even then, the inadequate facilities of a private company were relied upon to save the victims of the crash. 48 hours after the crash, according to reports, a warm body was still found, suggesting that some lives could have been saved if rescue operations had commenced minutes after that crash. Apart from the needless assassinations of possible opponents and rivals for power that characterized the IBB regime, there were also the totally senseless ones too, such as the death of Murtala Mohammed's first son immediately after visiting the seat of power in Aso Rock. What happened to the first son of late Murtala Mohammed, one-time Nigeria's president, was generously reported in the press at the time. The allegation was that during the friendly private visit, the young man was asked if he would be prepared to do a job. The young chap said he could not say until he was told what the job was all about. When told that it was to help facilitate the elimination of Chief NKO Abiola, the young man said he couldn't because Abiola was like a father to him. Recall that when Murtala Mohammed was assassinated, Abiola took the family of Murtala Mohammed as his own. The host quickly dismissed the suggestion as if it had been a joke and asked how the young man traveled to the State House. By private car, the young man said. "You are going about with security?" the host asked, pretending to look alarmed, and then detailed some security officers to escort the young man to his Mina destination. The body of the young man was later found that day in his car on the route between the seat of power in Abuja and Mina. In fact, it was reported that Sani Abacha at a point asked the boss of the Ministry of Information to frame up Dele Giwa, who by now had entered the picture. But the boss, being a principled and die-hard journalist, was said to have argued that it was difficult for a journalist to frame up a fellow journalist. Babangida boys went ahead to frame up Dele Giwa anyways. For those who do not know, Babangida boys were officers within the army at the time who enjoyed patronage of IBB and on many occasions served as his front on many projects and activities. 3 days before they killed Dele Giwa, Colonel A.K. Togo, the Deputy Director of Babangida's State Security Service, the SSS, invited Giwa to his office and accused him of involvement in the importation of arms while linking Giwa with persons alleged to be trying to stage a socialist revolution in Nigeria. 2 days before Dele Giwa's murder, Akilu allegedly phoned Dele Giwa's home to ask for direction because, according to him, Babangida's ADC has something, an invitation or something to offer to the late journalist. Dele Giwa allegedly invited the overseas editor of Newswatch magazine at the time to be around. Obviously, Giwa took the president's promise more serious than his colleagues at the Newswatch. This was why, when Giwa received the parcel and confirmed that it was from the president, his guest's first reaction was to dash off to take cover in the toilet adjacent to the room where Giwa opened the parcel bomb. The guest escaped death by the whiskers with blasted eardrums. An Arab terrorist who was recruited to collaborate with a University of Ibadan chemistry don, especially for the task, is said to have produced the bomb that killed Dele Giwa. The terrorist is alleged to have gone with Major Buba Mawa, then Ogbeha and Gwazo in a Peugeot station wagon car with fake license plate number to deliver the bomb at Dele Giwa's home. On arrival, they were told that Dele Giwa was not in, so they laid ambush nearby to watch movements in and out of Dele Giwa's premises. As soon as Dele Giwa was spotted entering his house, the allegation continues, the Arab terrorist offered to go and deliver the bomb himself. But his colleagues in crime stopped him on the grounds that a white man would look too suspicious for the job. Marwa, accompanied by Ogbeha, are alleged to have delivered the parcel bomb to Dele Giwa's son at the door, after which the crime team drove off to Mafoluku area in Lagos, where they burnt their delivery car. The same day, the Arab terrorist was flown out of Lagos, first to Kano, it was said, and then eventually out of the country. Major Buba Marwa was at the time rewarded with the rank of Lieutenant Colonel and posted to the Nigerian Embassy in Washington, USA as the new military attaché as payback for a job well done in the liquidation of Dele Giwa. His rise in the army was extremely rapid, and as a colonel, returned home to be governor of Lagos State. Armed robbers were said to have welcomed him to his new office with a kind of daredevilry never before experienced in Nigeria. Violence begets violence, they say, but the armed robbers raided from mile 12 to Ikeja, even as he was passing by on his own convoy. We are told that Marwa panicked, so Babangida pumped unusual resources into Marwa's coffers to ensure his success, which is the genesis of him tramping about as an achiever during his time as Lagos State governor that we hear about today. Marwa, Ogbeha, and Gwazo have since denied their alleged involvement in Dele Giwa's murder. Marwa, who owned an airline and therefore knows that it takes less than 8 hours to fly across the Atlantic to Nigeria, argued that he was studying in the USA at the time the murder happened. The implication of this, of course, was that it was impossible to take a few days off his studies to be part of that crime. Even General Babangida himself refused to make appearances during the Obasanjo Truth Commission headed by the late Justice Oputa to explain his involvement in the death of Dele Giwa. And so Dele Giwa's death remains one of the unsolved murders in the history of murder and crime killing in Nigeria. Marwa, who rose to fame through IBB's benevolence, is considered in the military circles as one of IBB boys, made up principally of the trusted cronies of the retired dictator. Accused of laundering money for IBB, Marwa again relied on the puerile argument that he was the Borno State governor in 1990, as if state governors are too busy governing diligently to travel out of Nigeria for a day or two or even a week on private businesses. In December 2005, when Marwa was detained for a couple of weeks by the EFCC for laundering money for Abacha, he allegedly admitted that he had no choice in the matter as a military officer. He was only doing his duty, he said. IBB's chiefs allegedly colluded with 419 criminals to create the overnight semi-illiterate money bags without class or shame, including the 150 members of the National Assembly that in 2005 sent IBB a birthday card, and ever since, some of which still throng his Minna residence. And this group also forming the bulk of his supporters and campaigners who tried to return him to power towards the end of the Obasanjo's regime as a civilian president in around 2007. Babangida is said to have sapped or totally wiped out the middle class out of existence with the destruction of the Naira, which he did by fiat in 1985, when he downgraded the Naira exchange rates from about 2 Naira to 18 Naira to the dollar. By the time he was forced out of office in 1993, the Naira was exchanging for at least 60 Naira to a dollar. The Nigerian society was now reduced to 2 classes of either the very poor or the very rich, most of who are rogues according to analysts. And we can see where that has gotten us to as a people or as a country today. Babangida is said to have first concentrated on pulverizing his military base by tinkering with the 1985 Decree 17 to give himself sole authority to fire his military chiefs, including the Chief of General Staff, Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, Service Chiefs, and the Inspector General of Police. The Gideon Oka failed coup of April 22, 1990 provided Babangida with the opportunity to further purge the military. With total control of the military, IBB was ready to pursue his president for life agenda. For over 8 years, Babangida kept shifting his handing over dates and juggling his transition program by arbitrarily banning and unbanning political parties, particularly known opponents of his military rule. It's reported to have spent 40 billion naira on his endless transition program and bribed all and sundry, including the NLC with 50 million naira as it was reported, NUJ, that's the Nigerian Union of Journalists, with 20 million naira, PMAN, that's Performing Musician Association of Nigeria, with 30 million naira, and so on, to try to silence all of them. He was said to have attempted to compromise some vocal critics by settling them, and those he could not recruit, he sacked where possible, or detained, or killed, or hounded into exile. And 2 years into his rule in 1987, IBB announced that he was planning to bequeath a lasting legacy of civil rule through a gradual learning political process. 4 years into his regime in 1989, he lifted for the first time his ban on partisan politics and set up 2 political parties. One was called the Social Democratic Party, SDP, and the other was called the National Republican Convention, NRC. The handing over date to civilian government was postponed once again from late 1990 to the 1st of October 1992. He allowed elections to be held into local governments in 1990. And in 1991, Babangida instigated intra-party squabbles to find excuse to ban 12 of the candidates participating in the governorship elections. Candidates replacing disqualified ones at barely 1 week to campaign. Elections into the state assemblies miraculously held without too much acrimony, followed shortly afterwards by elections into the National Assembly. All the elections, known individuals who were strongly against IBB or the military in power were sidelined, banned, or hounded into exile. Prominent among whom were Ibrahim Tahar of the MPN, Sam Mbakwe, Chris Okole, Wahab Dusumu, Ebenezer Babatope, and a number of them. Allegations of massive rigging was invoked on November 17, 1992 to ban Adamu Siroma and Shehu Musa Yaradua, who had emerged from party primaries as presidential candidates for the NRC and the SDP respectively, and 21 other presidential aspirants, including Chief Arthur Nzerube, Chief Olufalaye, Alhaji Latif Jakonde, and Alhaji Umar Shinkafi from participating in the scheduled August 1992 presidential election and all other future elections. The trick was that Babangida was gradually narrowing the field of potential presidential materials to himself. Remember that Babangida had promised Yaradua the presidency, as I stated, when Yaradua helped to actualize the 1985 coup that brought him to power. The ban did not go down well with the political elites in general, and particularly with Yaradua, who had assumed he was the anointed heir who was due to take over leadership of Nigeria from Babangida naturally. With the ban, Babangida once again postponed his handing over dates from October 1st, 1992 to December 5, 1992. Soon after, Babangida mandated the National Electoral Commission, NEC, to conduct the presidential primaries of the political parties. And he again fixed a new date of January 3, 1993 for the handing over of the reins of power to a civilian government. Bribery, thuggery, rigging, ethnic cleavages, etc. ruined the NEC supervised political parties' presidential primaries, resulting in the dissolution of party executives who were replaced by sole administrators and national coordinators. handing over date was once again postponed to August 27, 1993. Baba Gana Kingibe, who was the SDP chairman before the dissolution of the party executives and was then supposed to be managing the affairs of Yar'Adua, was alleged to have received Babangida's backing and financial support to aspire as presidential candidate, obviously to cause confusion in the Yar'Adua's political camp. Kingibe pasted his campaign posters all over the place, causing bad blood between himself and Yar'Adua, which spilled over into the just SDP convention of 1993. In the meantime, Babangida was busy creating anarchy in the ranks of the politicians by introducing his modified open ballot system and insisting that presidential aspirants go through the tedious wards, local government and state congresses. This eventually produced 2 presidential aspirants, and the unwieldy 62 presidential aspirants had to go through further elimination process at various national congresses before the just SDP and the Port Harcourt NRC conventions of 1993. Several irregularities were observed at the party conventions, and a lot of money exchanged hands. Alhaji Bashar Tufa for the NRC and Basharu MKO Abiola for the SDP emerged as presidential flag bearers. Babangida, who was unhappy that progress was being made in the presidential election process, was further pissed off when his nominee, Pascal, the ex-NLC president, as Abiola's running mate, actually to spy on and undermine Abiola, was rejected by Abiola. Abiola also upset Yar'Adua's calculation by not accepting Atiku as his running mate and chose Baba Gana Kingibe instead. Of course, the emergence at last of promising presidential candidates for both parties was not a very palatable option for Abacha, who himself was still nursing the dream to succeed Babangida, although pretending to be on the side of Babangida. Analysts say Abacha misled Babangida into thinking of him as a possible ally. So the scene was now set for Babangida to feel that if he annulled the election, he would have the support of Abacha, Yar'Adua, and other perceived powerful enemies of Abiola, including a leading traditional ruler in the southwest at the time. Babangida, in his determination to scuttle the presidential election at all costs, promulgated Decree 13, forbidding the presidential flag bearers of the 2 political parties from doing anything whatsoever that would influence the members of the public to vote for them at the elections scheduled for June 12, 1993. Then Babangida empowered the NEC to disqualify any of the candidates at will, and as a final fallback strategy to scuttle Nigeria's democratic dream, he set up his Association of Better Nigeria, ABN, using Senator Arthur Nzerubi as proxy or as a front. On June 10, 1993, at the unholy hour of 9:30 p.m., late Justice Ipeme, who was appointed a few days earlier and hurriedly transferred from Lagos to Abuja, granted a court order to the ABN, restraining the NEC chairman Humphrey Nwosu from conducting the presidential election on June 12, 1993. The director of the United States Information Service, USIS, in Nigeria at the time, Mr. O'Brien, warned that the US government would not be happy if the June 12 election was cancelled. Babangida was said to have panicked, and although he declared O'Brien persona non grata and ordered him out of the country in his personal interest, Babangida allowed Nwosu to go ahead with the election. The election was adjured by the international and local observers monitoring it and by the 2 political parties involved as the fairest and the freest in the history of Nigeria. By the evening of June 14, 1993, more than 50% of the election results had been authenticated and released by NEC, showing that SDP's Moshood Abiola had swept the poll. To everyone's surprise, Babangida suddenly ordered the NEC not to release any more results. On June 23, 1993, Babangida gave an unsigned statement to Nduka Irabo, his press secretary, announcing the cancellation of the presidential election on the radio. The unsigned statement was a strategy to allow Babangida to deny its authenticity should Nigeria begin to boil over the announcement. But by this time, Nigerians had become too hungry and docile. to react. Babangida annulled the June 12 election entirely on his own, based on his selfish personal agenda to rule indefinitely. Before annulling the election, he rallied the connivance and support of some critical emirs and the leading Yoruba traditional ruler known to be antagonistic to Abiola's political ambition, and the signatures of a bunch of political and military apologists or jobbers tagged the G34 on a document entitled Peace Pact in endorsement of his annulment of the June 12, 1993 elections. It might interest you, the viewer, to know that many of these men who comprised the G34 at that time, who many analysts have tagged traitors to their country, who were members of that G34 at the time, are still around or may still be around today, making decisions for Nigeria. Babangida's military constituency, by and large, was against the annulment. Abacha saw this as his opportunity to act, and with the backing of the armed forces of Nigeria, warned Babangida that he would be entirely on his own after the August 27, 1993 handover date. Babangida, in fear, concocted and swore in an illegal arrangement he called the Interim National Government (ING) to take over office from August 27, 1993. After swearing in his ING on August 26, 1993, Babangida, who was supposed to be pulled out of the army in the military tradition, played all sorts of pranks to delay the event from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. and then to 3 p.m. when the Nigerian army removed Babangida's guards from the Eagle Square to warn him that his time was up. There is this strong allegation among the rank and file of the armed forces and members of the defense correspondents of newspapers attached to the seat of power at the time that Babangida arranged in the last couple of weeks before leaving office for several armored vehicles loads of newly printed naira notes to be delivered daily to his Mina palatial abode, obviously with the connivance of Abacha, perhaps as his mentor's retirement benefits. Abacha and Babangida are said to have had several serious financial problems with Abiola, but one of them takes the cake, or one of them takes the crown. It was over some foreign war booty amounting to $215 million. It is alleged that Babangida had asked Abiola to help him launder it when Babangida was in office, but Abiola was not interested. Babangida allegedly sidestepped Abiola and eventually prevailed upon a member of Abiola's family to rescue the situation. Then the person suddenly died. It is further alleged that Abiola was asked to return the money, and he truthfully and honestly said he knew nothing about it, and even if there was such a thing, he had no authority over the matter. Then he was asked to pressurize the children of the deceased to play ball. Abiola again refused, arguing that he had no legal or moral rights to do so. So the powers that be decided early after his arrest that he would die in detention for declaring himself president. The Gulf War oil windfall is Babangida's often referenced loot.
Camouflage.
Abacha set up a panel headed by the highly respected economist Pius Okibo in 1994 October to reorganize the CBN. Okibo's panel discovered that $12.2 billion of the $12.4 billion accruable from the Gulf War excesses was frittered away or unaccounted for through nebulous or phantom projects that could not be traced. Only $206 million was left in the account. According to Kigbo, disbursements were clandestinely undertaken while the country was openly reeling with crushing external debt. This represents, no matter the initial justification for creating the account, a gross abuse of public trust. End of quote. This was Okibo's opinion on the results or the outcome of his investigations. Obasanjo in 2001 decided to look quietly into the missing NNPC's $12.2 billion Gulf War oil windfall linked to Babangida. It was found that the documents pertaining to the fraud had all disappeared from the vaults of the CBN. Brilliant and highly respected economist Pius Okibo, who handled the investigations into the scam, had private copies. Before he could deliver them, he insisted on traveling to London against strong, wise private counsel, and he was wasted. Other members of the Kigo panel had copies of the reports anyways, and were still alive, but nothing was done about that report up until the making of this video. Government miraculously found the CBN documents later when it suited it, and aspects of the documents concerning IBB were published during the threats by members of the House of Representatives to impeach President Obasanjo in July 2005 because of speculations that IBB was one of the northern elites fanning the plot. Analysts say Babangida was ruthless in the way he amassed his colossal wealth. First is the illegal self-allocation of free oil sold on the spot market. Then he initiated the corrupt culture of maintaining a huge monthly security vote virtually as pocket money. Rather than repair our refineries, let alone make them work at maximum capacity, IBB built private refineries in Cote d'Ivoire and the Republic of Benin. John Fashanu, in a private investigation published in African Confidential early in Obasanjo's regime, discovered an alleged $6 billion debt buyback scam by IBB between 1988 and 1993. Another $14.4 billion disappeared into offshore accounts as currency stabilization and debt buyback scheme that actually cost $2.5 billion. John Fashanu was trying to recover $17 billion for the Nigerian government, only for the CBN to say they had no record of the deals. The records are out there abroad, but cleaned out at home to conceal the theft that they call deals. The Wolf Bags Principles, an initiative of 11 banks and institutions across the world to fight serious international financial crimes, traced another $3 billion of Nigeria's stolen money to Babangida's account abroad, and $4.5 billion to Abacha's account. Although Babangida used mostly fictitious names for his numerous accounts abroad, the EFCC could zero in on some of the accounts by following up on the dust raised early in 2003 over financing of a leading Nigerian telecommunications project in which Babangida is alleged to own 75% shares. Mohammed, his son, fronts for his father on the authentic board of the company. Those claiming to have borrowed from foreign banks in the heat of the EFCC revelations at the time have not identified the collateral or shorty they used. It is said that IBB could not participate in the Obasanjo's 2003 inauguration ceremony because he was allegedly out of the country sorting out the Interpol queries on the Alcatel slush account alerts at the time. Even later, the telecoms financing details through Siemens and others investigated by the EFCC traced ghost checks to issuing private sources of funds and their local and international banks to unravel possible laundering of untold amounts of funds, all of which happened under the IBB regime for 8 years. Luscious contracts for the construction of Abuja were awarded to front companies of Babangida and his cronies, including Julius Berger and Arab Constructions, that between them virtually single-handedly handled the construction of the new Federal Capital Territory. The security dangers posed by foreign companies being saddled with the sole responsibility of constructing a country's capital and having access to its structural secrets, including possible presidential underground escape routes and military arsenal vaults, is mind-boggling to say the least. Analysts say the largest, most prestigious housing estate in Alexandria, Egypt's leading holiday resort, is alleged to belong to Babangida. Even Egyptians themselves cannot afford his rent, which is alleged to be in dollars. All the tenants of this property are rich foreigners and the staff of multinational companies operating in Alexandria. The estate is alleged to have its own airport, which Babangida uses whenever he visits. Babangida is alleged to own several other housing estates around the world, including houses on Bishop Avenue in London. He is said to use his London properties as guest houses or gifts for people on his compromise list. He is considered generous with gifts of cars with their boots stuffed with naira notes when he wants a job done or when he wants to buy people's consciences. Let us pretend that Babangida was a general throughout his service year in the Nigerian army? Again, let's assume he spent 30 years in the army and was paid 100,000 naira monthly. Actually, salaries of generals were less than 10,000 naira a month at the time until it was reviewed upwards. But for the sake of this argument, let's assume it is 100,000 naira. And let us assume he saved every kobo of his salary throughout his years as a military officer. Analysts say it will be worth about 60 million naira or more plus interest in the bank today. Babangida's 50-bedroom palatial abode in Minna is alleged to be conservatively worth billions of naira, and he does not owe any bank on its construction. Even Babangida's son, one of the richest human beings his age on earth today, is said to have never worked anywhere for any company, but yet he is one of the richest person his age alive today. In 2003, IBB threw a wedding party for his first daughter, which numbed the nation. Some 28 governors were in attendance, and in June 2004, he treated us to another dreamlike political carnival during his son's wedding. No one dared to ask where the money came from to set up such a palatial abode or scandalous and intimidating wedding carnivals in our jungle of abject poverty and hunger called country. Nigerians revel in the lavish show of shame. All we have seen and continue to see is praise singing and praise singers from a populace that is so impoverished they can't even differentiate their heroes from their villains anymore. Today, many analysts insist that IBB's legacy remains that of corruption, tears, blood, and death. As if to buttress this point, almost all the principal characters involved in leadership tussle with General Babangida since 1985, Chief MKO Abiola, Shehu Musa Yaradua, General Indiagbon, and even General Abacha have all died through induced cardiac arrest, lethal injection, poisoned food, gas telephone handset, and so on. But today, IBB, 83 years, a widower of many years now, alone with his ill-gotten and blood-soaked stupendous wealth, is confined to one spot in his palatial Minna hilltop mansion, perhaps with the stark realization now of the vanity and the futility of it all, waiting for the sun to set for him, leaving in its wake a legacy of lies, deceits, assassinations, looting, unsolved murders, and sheer evil, perhaps the sort of evil that can only rival that of Satan himself. In the end, everything fades, including the Godfather.
If you've enjoyed this video and like to see more content like this, please help support our growth by giving a thumbs up, subscribing to our YouTube channel, following our various social media handles, and please do send us a little donation to help us continue